ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्ण उदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our Saturday morning session. We will continue on our journey of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 16 onwards. Now, verse 16 and 17 we will take together. But before we go there, I have one question. The question is regarding the description of the Supreme. In the last session, we talked about the description of Supreme given in chapter 7, chapter 9, chapter 13, and also in chapter 15. So the question is that why this has been repeated so many times? It's a very important question, and we should go into this before we start verse 16 and 17. Now, if you look at the world outside, for example, I am sitting on a chair, I am sitting in a room, you are sitting on a chair. Now that chair looks real, the room looks real, your body looks real, my body looks real. When you drive a car, you sit down in the car looks real. While when you talk about Paramatma, when you talk about Atma, that doesn't look real. You can't make an image of it. For example, when I say elephant, immediately you can make an image of elephant. Elephant's image comes in your brain, in your mind. But when I say Paramatma, there would be no image in your mind because it is without any image. So what happens is that when certain things which can form image in your mind, it makes a deeper impression on our sense organs and the mind. And it's easier for us to understand that. But when you talk about things which are without any image, which are nirakar, then it doesn't make an impression on your mind and it's not easy for us to understand. When you talk about science, for example, they talk about matter. They analyze a mineral, they will take a mineral, they will analyze its components, they will take a machine, the mechanical engineer will analyze the different parts of the machine. But when we talk about Atma and Paramatma, the science doesn't have anything to analyze. So in the real world, what we say that this is in existence is actually exactly opposite to what Vedanta says. Vedanta says that whatever objects you see around you, they are mithya. They do not really exist. And what you can't see, what is avyakt, that is what is real, which is pervading everywhere. So all these objects appear and disappear into that all-pervading power, which is insensible, unintelligible, invisible to our sense organs. So this contradiction is not easy for human mind to understand because mind can understand things which you can grasp with your sense organs. When you can hear some words, you can understand. When you touch something, you can understand. When you can smell something, you can understand. When you see something, you can understand. When you taste something, you can understand. But something which is beyond all these five is not easy to understand. And that is why Lord Krishna has taken time to repeat these insensible, unintelligible attribute of the Supreme so that we give some attention to them. Because this insensible, unintelligible, whatever name we give, Tat or Brahma or whatever, Atma, Paramatma, whatever name we give, is beyond our sense perception. It cannot be grasped by our senses, and therefore we, despite our best effort, we are not able to understand it properly. And that is why Lord Krishna has given more and more emphasis on this particular aspect so that we understand it properly. And that is the reason that it has been repeated here. This is also the reason that this has been repeated many, many times in Upanishads as well. Because this looks exactly opposite to what science says. For science, the wood table on which you are sitting is a real one. The chair you are sitting is a real one. The house in which you are living in is a real one. For them, that is a fact. While for Vedanta, these things are mithya. The fact is all pervading supreme power, which is insensible, which is unintelligible, which is avyakt, which is non-manifest. So that is the reason that we give attention to non-manifest. We must understand this particular power, which is not easy to understand, and that is the reason he has repeated it several times. Now we come to verse number 16 and 17 together. वर्ष नंबर 16, इस संसार में नाशवान और अविनाशी ये दो प्रकार के पुरुष हैं। इनमें संपूर्ण भूत प्राणियों के शरीर तो नाशवान और जीवात्मा अविनाशी कहा गया है। वर्ष नंबर 17, इन दोनों से उत्तम पुरुष तो अन्य ही है जो तीनों लोकों में प्रवेश करके सबका धारण पोषण करता है एवं अविनाशी परमेश्वर और परमात्मा इस प्रकार कहा गया है। Now, so far, Lord Krishna in all the chapters has talked about two elements, Prakriti and Purush. He has talked about Kshetra and Kshetragya. Kshetra is Prakriti, where all the things happen, which is a manifest power. He has talked about Aparashakti in chapter 7, which is actually Kshetra, which is in manifest, which can be seen with or which can be sensed with our sense organs. So that is one power, that is Prakriti. And the second power is Purus, that is the consciousness, the Chetana, which provides life force to all the species of life which exist, and to a smaller extent to all the gross five elements of nature, including the mineral regime and the plant regime. So he has been talking about these two great forces of nature, Prakriti and Purus. But here, for the first time, he is distinguishing slightly more. He is talking about a third force. Now, first force is very clear. We all know it is the body, which is made of the five gross elements. We talked about that. The five tanmatras, that is basically the sense of hearing, rather than the power of hearing, the power of touch, the power of sight, the power of taste, and the power of smell. They give birth to five gross elements of nature and also to the five sense organs we have. And in fact, all the bodies, in whatever form they exist, they are made with a combination of these five elements. The combination may differ. In some cases, the combination could be, there could be more element of earth less element of air, more element of fire, less element of water. That combination could differ. But ultimately, all the bodies in whatever form we see in this world, they all come from those five gross elements, which is nature. So that part is very clear to us, that our body is made of the five elements, which is called Prakriti, which was also called Kshetra. Some people also called it Maya. Some people can also call it Vyakt. Whatever name you give, doesn't matter. That is the first part, which is Naswan, which is depreciating constantly. Now, this element is constantly depreciating. This is what he said. इस संसार में नाशवान और अविनाशी दो प्रकार के पुरुष हैं. So this element is Nashwan. This is constantly transforming, changing. The house we see right now is not the same after 10 seconds because it has undergone chemical changes. We see a particular cloth right now. After a few seconds, it will not be the same cloth because it undergoes chemical changes. Our body also constantly changing. We don't see the difference second by second, but we see after a period of time. Like I am not the same person which I used to be 20 years ago because there has been change which I can see visible, is now visible to my sense organs. But the change is happening constantly. It's every single second the change is happening. So that is Nashwan. That is one part. The second part is some जो नाशवान नहीं है, अविनाशी है, जिसमें संपूर्ण भूत प्राणियों के शरीर तो नाशवान और जीवात्मा अविनाशी कहा गया है. Now we talked about Kshetra and Kshetragya. We also talked that the nature is the place where the birth happens and where the seed of Chaitanya is, embedded by the Supreme. And with the combination of the two, the species of life come into being, come into existence. Now that Jivatma, that particular Chaitanya, which is associated with our body, which has an identification with our body, that is called Jivatma. It has limitations. It has limitations because it is confined to the body which we have, or any species which has a body, it is confined to that body. The body and mind limit that consciousness. It is not anymore unlimited. It is not asimit anymore. It becomes within the limits of that particular body where it is embedded. Now, because of that limitation, it loses its quality of variety of things. And that is why Lord Krishna is now distinguishing between the Jivatma and Paramatma. Now, this is a subject which is of great debate between various or amongst many, many scholars in Hindu philosophy. Some people believe that Atma and Paramatma are the same. There is no distinction between the two. Some people believe there is a distinction between the two because Atma is associated with the body mind instrument. It is impacted by that, like we discussed Kshetra and Kshetragya. Kshetragya, which is part of the body, is impacted by our body mind instrument, and therefore there is an association, identification. And that is why, because of that identification, many times we think that we are the whole body. I mean, the whole body mind complex with the consciousness is me, which is not true, because the body mind complex is different and me is different. So this identification with the body mind complex limits the consciousness which we have in our body mind complex to the body mind complex alone. It is not unlimited, it is not what you call universal consciousness anymore. Now, why it is done? It is done because of two reasons. Anything which is unlimited does not have any utility for us, for any manifest being. For example, Akash. It's a vast, infinite Akash. We cannot use it unless we create a small house in it. We have to create a room or a tent or something which can be used by us. So we limit that Akash to a smaller area by creating boundaries around it. Even a bird will create a ghosla, will create a small nest on the tree to inhabit. So the vast infinite space or sky or akash which is available, even that has to be made in a way, with boundaries so that we can use it. That is a limitation of manifest power. Now, even for example, water bodies. You cannot use the vast ocean if the whole ocean is. We have to create a small well or a pipe water system which comes to your house, or we have to have a small lake. So, to make it useful, we have to create smaller bodies with boundaries. That is the reason it can be. Even breathing, for example, you can say the whole atmosphere with air is open, but the breathing system doesn't use that. We take only one breath at a time and we leave one breath at a time. So even there we limit it to a breath. So because we have body mind limitations, we cannot use things which are unlimited in nature. And that is why in our body, the consciousness has been made limited to the body. And that is the reason we all appear different. Though it is the same consciousness, but because our instrument of the body mind complex is different, we all look different. All the 7, 8 corrupt people, Arab people which are there in this world, they all look different because of that limitation. So this is a complex structure of Maya. This is what we call Maya of the Supreme. That though the consciousness is one single entity, because it is confined to the boundaries of a particular being, it becomes limited, and therefore it gives an impression that it is separate from the rest. So we consider every human being as separate. While the bodies are made of the 5 elements, the consciousness is one element. Basically, these are the 6 parts, nothing beyond that. But every human being looks very different. So this is the reason, this whole thing appears limited. And this is why Jivatma is called Jivatma. It is not called Paramatma, because it is limited to the Jeev in which it is inhabiting. In my Jeev it is inhabiting, so it is my Jivatma, your Jivatma, bird's Jivatma, Hathi's Jivatma. So that Jivatma is limited to that body, and that is why it has got limitations. That is why it is called Ans. The Paramatma is called Vibhu, that is everywhere, present everywhere. But we are Ansi. We have only a drop of that. So this is the second part, Jivatma. So we have first part, which is made of 5 gross elements, which is the Prakriti, which is the nature. The second part, the consciousness which is infused into the bodies, That consciousness, because of its identification with the body and limitations of the body, remain confined to the body. And that is why it is called Jivatma. In bird also it's called Jivatma, in human being also it's called Jivatma. And the limit of the consciousness is actually guided by the qualities of the body. Now, if the quality of the body is of a bird, then the Jivatma will be limited by that body of the bird of that instrument. Similarly, the Jivatma in me will be guided or limited by the qualities of my body. That is why the quality of body becomes very important in this case. And that is why Lord Krishna has earlier said in verse number 8, in verse number 8 he said, जैसे वायु गंध के स्थान से गंध को ग्रहण करके ले जाता है, उसी तरह देह देह अभिमानियों का स्वामी जीवात्मा भी उस शरीर को त्याग देता है और मन सहित उन इंद्रियों के सूक्ष्म भाग को लेके नए शरीर में चला जाता है. So the instrument depends on the quality of what is taken from the previous body, the Suksham Sarir. So the Suksham Sarir defines the quality of the body, while the Jivatma, the Atma is the same, the consciousness is the same, but its effectiveness will depend on that Suksham Sarir which it inherited from the previous body. So this is the distinction, this is how the Jivatma operates in everyone. Now it's up to the human being, only for the human being, because all other species of life, they do not have that developed mental ability, therefore they cannot enhance, they cannot do the self growth. We are able to do the self growth because of the quality of our mind and intellect, the inner instrument which we call. And this is how the human body is extremely important to develop our own self further, so that in the next birth we inherit a better instrument, a better body, and then we continuously grow from one body to another. So this is the process which is associated with the two, the Prakriti and Jivatma. Now he talks about Paramatma in verse number 17. इन दोनों से उत्तम पुरुष तो अन्य ही है, जो तीनों लोकों में प्रवेश करके सबका धारण पोषण करता है एवं अविनाशी परमेश्वर और परमात्मा कहा गया है. Now he is distinguishing this between Paramatma and Jivatma. If you look at chapter number 2, he has not done that distinction. While describing Atma, he said, Atma achadya hai, adayya hai, agrahya hai. He has used all the qualities, saying that Atma amar hai, ajar hai, Atma is beyond destruction. But he has not given that distinction there, that Jivatma has limitations, Paramatma has no limitations. Paramatma is all pervasive, Paramatma is unlimited. Anything which is unlimited cannot be confined to a smaller space. But since the body-mind complex is limited, the Chaitanya which goes into that complex remains confined to the body-mind complex. So this appears to be a contradiction, that how that Paramatma which goes into our body-mind complex becomes limited. It becomes limited not because of its own qualities, but because of the qualities of the body we inherit. So that is the distinction. And here, if we are able to distinguish between body and consciousness in our own self, then our own consciousness, which is right now limited to the body-mind complex, will become unlimited, and it will become part of the universal consciousness. So that is what we call self-realization. Self-realization is the stage where we make a distinction between our body-mind complex and our consciousness. And we link our consciousness with the universal consciousness, which is Paramatma, which is unlimited, which is all pervasive, which is omnipotent, which is omniscient. That is what the Paramatma is. So once we are able to reach that state, once we can distinguish our body mind complex and consciousness and link the consciousness with Paramatma, then that Jivatma is no longer a Jivatma, that Jivatma becomes Paramatma. Now, this is a subject of great debate amongst scholars. In fact, Shankaracharya does not distinguish between Paramatma and Atma. He says Atma is also Paramatma. But Atma is Paramatma only when we are able to distinguish between our body-mind complex and Atma and merge Atma with Paramatma, then yes. But if we are confining our Atma to our body-mind complex alone, and we consider this complex as one single entity which consists of the five gross elements of the nature and Atma, then it is not Paramatma. Then it is a Jivatma. So this distinction we must understand, that we have to rise beyond Jivatma and we have to become Paramatma. That process is called self-realization. When we are segregating the Atma from the body-mind complex and leaving that body-mind complex to the nature and merging the Atma with Paramatma, then there is no distinction between Paramatma and Atma. But so long as we consider ourselves confined to this body-mind complex and our consciousness is limited to this body-mind complex, till that time, Jivatma is separate and Paramatma is separate. Aham Brahmasmi is possible only when we distinguish, we become drashta, when we are able to see everything happening, including in our body-mind complex. But the seer, the person who is seeing the drashta, is separate from what is happening around. Drashta is subject and drashya is the nature. That distinction, if we can make, then we reach that state. So this is what Lord Krishna has explained this for the first time, the distinction between Jivatma and Paramatma. We have been talking about Prakriti and Purus in many chapters. He talked about Parashakti and Aparashakti in chapter 7. He also talked about body and Atma in chapter 2 and in many other places. But in Bhagavad Gita, these are two verses where for the first time a distinction has been drawn between Jivatma and Paramatma. And this distinction is very important for us because we are Jivatma. If we want to become Paramatma, if we want to realize ourselves, we have to segregate our Jivatma from the body-mind complex so that the consciousness is segregated and consciousness becomes part of the universal consciousness and the body-mind complex merges with the nature. So this is what self-realization is, and this process is possible only in the human beings because we have that higher mental and intellectual power which enables us to understand all that. Now, this is also the greatest distinction between Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. The Western philosophy is only confined to maximum, to the first verse, that is body-mind complex and the consciousness associated with it. They don't go beyond that. None of the religions go beyond that. Some of the religions don't even go to the consciousness there. In fact, the modern science talks about consciousness, but only in the context of a particular combination of matter which gives rise to, to consciousness. That is what Charles Darwin said, and that is what many other scientists have said. So, there they do not talk about consciousness, they do not talk about universal consciousness. Most other religions, whether it is Christianity, Islam, they talk only about Jivatma and the body mind complex. They do not talk about the universal consciousness. Now, the foundation of all the consciousness on which everything else appears and disappears is Paramatma, is the universal consciousness on which all the manifestation, all the five gross elements, all species of life, billions and billions of humans and birds and animals and whatever forms you see on the world, they all appear and disappear in that platform of universal consciousness. This is what is the discovery of great Indian saints. They went beyond the body mind complex. They went beyond the uh, consciousness which is trapped into the body mind complex, and they looked at a very different picture. They looked at a vast, infinite, unlimited ocean of consciousness which gives rise to variety of manifestation. And that is why they compared it with the ocean waves, that the ocean remains all the time, the waves appear and then they disappear, they appear from the ocean, they dissolve into the ocean again. Similarly, all the manifestation appears from the supreme and then dissolve back into the supreme. उससे उद्भव होता है, उसी में लय हो जाता है, उसी में विलय हो जाता है. So this is the distinction between Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. And that is why Western philosophy is more materialistic, but it is also utilitarian in that sense, because they talk about the instruments which are useful for the human being and for others, like a car or by refrigerator or by motorbike or bicycle or uh, an instrument, telephone, for example, because these are instruments which are useful for this body mind complex linked with Jivatma. Beyond that, they don't go. That is the limitation. But our science is far, far deeper than that. It goes beyond that, from where the universal consciousness gives birth to all these manifestations. It goes to the source of the universe. It explains how this manifestation appear and disappear and from where it come and where it goes. So this is what we must understand from these two verses. These are very profound explanations of the most profound science of our existence. Now verse number 18. क्योंकि मैं नासवान जड़ वर्ग क्षेत्र से तो सर्वथा अतीत हूं और अविनाशी जीवात्मा से उत्तम हूं, इसलिए लोक में और वेदों में मेरे को पुरुषोत्तम नाम से जाना जाता है. Now, this chapter has been called Purushottam Yoga, because of that. Because in this chapter he explains what is Purushottam and what is Jivatma. Now he has very clearly said in this verse, नासवान जड़ वर्ग से तो सर्वथा अतीत हूं. Naturally, the nature is dead, it is innate. It cannot do anything unless it is infused with, power of consciousness. A stone is lying, it can do nothing unless you infuse it with consciousness. When it can walk, it can talk, it can discuss, it can think, then it is possible. Though stone also has some amount of consciousness, but that is very minimum. So minimum that it cannot act. It cannot become an agent of, action. Now, अविनाशी जीवात्मा से भी उत्पन्न हो, उत्तम. Now, Jivatma is Avinashi. Jivatma is part of Atma. So, in that sense, it is eternal, it is never destroyed, but it is suffering from the limitations of the body mind complex. It is confined to this body mind complex in which I am. And that is the reason that it is not universal, it is not the ultimate, it is only a drop in the ocean. The ocean is what? Outside, which is unlimited, which is, beyond our conception. Now, even this modern science says that whatever manifest universe you see today, these are all scientific works, scientific books which have been written by very great scientists, that only 4%, that is what they say. I don't know how they calculated, but they did it in some method or some imagination, that only 4% of the entire universe is in the manifest form. 96% is avyakt, non-manifest, which cannot be sensed, which cannot be perceived. So all those trillions of planets and suns and solar systems and galaxies which we talk about, all the species of life we talk about are confined, even according to the modern science, to that 4% manifest universe. If you look at the, Akash in an open field, we see it is all non-manifest. Basically, you only see Akash. Very few, limited, maybe in the night you see a few stars. You see the sun and the moon, they appear very, very small. And those people who have gone in the space, they tell you that the whole thing looks empty. In fact, they talk about black holes today. Now, those black holes are actually the modern name for what we call avyakt, non-manifest, which has not manifested in any form anywhere. So even if we take the explanation of modern science today, even that science is telling us that only 4% of the total universe is in the manifest form. So this is what the modern science tells us, 96% is non-manifest. In fact, the Vedanta will tell you that 99.9% is non-manifest. 0.01% alone is manifest. So the power of non-manifest is not only many, many times more, but it's infinite. That power is what is called Paramatma. Paramatma is not a person who is sitting in the sky and creating things and punishing people and sending them to the heaven and the hell and taking account of all your activities. No, he has only set the parameters. He has passed the laws. He has put the laws in place in the world that you will get the harvest of what you are sowing. You will reap the harvest of your own seeds. There's nothing beyond that he does. He is silent, he is quiet, he doesn't act, he just sitting and observing. That's it. Now that Paramatma is the supreme, which is called Purushottam. Now the Purushottam is the vast unmanifest entity, in which manifest entity is very minuscule. That whole thing is called Paramatma, but the manifest entity with species of life is called Jivatma. The manifest gross elements, 5 gross elements, that is Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal or Prithvi. That is the space, air, fire, water and earth. These 5 gross elements, including, this is called Prakriti. The Jivatma is in each of the living species of life, that is called Jivatma. And the whole infinite expansion of consciousness in this whole universe is called Paramatma. So this is the distinction he says, that the the various species of life can come and go and disappear and appear. Planets go and appear and disappear. The galaxies can appear and disappear in that vast entity of consciousness which exists all around. There's nothing that is what this verse which we recite, Purn Madah Purn Midam Purnat Purn Mudachyate. This is what it means, that that vast entity is complete in every respect, and that entity is never reduced, never uh, diminished, despite whatever you take out of it. So whatever manifestation may happen out of that, that entity remains undiminished all the time. So this is what Lord Krishna is saying in these 2-3 verses here. Now verse number 19. भारत, जो ज्ञानी पुरुष मुझको इस प्रकार तत्व से पुरुषोत्तम जानता है, वह सर्वज्ञ पुरुष सब प्रकार से निरंतर मुझ वासुदेव परमेश्वर को ही बचता है. Now, if we know this thing, if we understand these three manifestations, manifestation of the physical nature, manifestation of Jivatma, where the Atma is trapped into a body-mind complex, and the manifestation of the vast, unlimited entity or universal consciousness, which is infinite in nature. If we understand these three, and we also understand that the first two, the physical nature and the Jivatma, they appear into this vast entity, and in which the nature appears and disappears, the bodies appear and disappear. All that is happening like the waves are happening or appearing and disappearing in the ocean. If we understand that thing properly, then what is that? वो मुझ में ही है, मुझको ही बसता है. Now bhajne का मतलब, you don't have to sit on in a temple and do puja and do all kinds of things. That can be done. That is also fine. That creates your feeling, that generates your sentiments. That's fine. I'm not against that. But real bhajna वो है जब when we realize all this reality of our existence, that there are three layers of our existence. One is Kshetra, Kshetragya, but Kshetragya is divided into two parts. That part which is called Jivatma, which is trapped into the body-mind complex, and then which is Paramatma, which is absolutely, according to the modern science, if we take that example, all that 96% unmanifest part of the universe. So this is how we should interpret these verses, and if we can understand that, then we are really praying to the Supreme. Then we are keeping that into the mind. Now, bhajna is, I think this word has come earlier also. Bhajna is not ritual. It is not sitting in a temple and doing puja. It is not sitting on the yajna and doing yajna. It is constantly reminding yourself that you are part of that Supreme. Your body-mind complex and your consciousness is part of that Supreme. You have come here and you will go back to the Supreme. This manifestation is transient. This has come for a short period. This will go back to that original form, original ocean from where it has appeared, and it will continue to come into the waves and go back. So if we realize that, then we are really praying to the Supreme. That is the real prayer. That is what he says. Where Sarvagya Purus, you become Sarvagya. You know everything once you know these three things. So these three things are the crux of it. Then आप परमेश्वर की पूजा हमेशा कर रहे हैं. Then verse number 20, हे निष्पाप अर्जुन, इस प्रकार ये अति रहस्य युक्त गोपनीय शास्त्र मेरे द्वारा कहा गया है, जिसको तत्व से जानकर मनुष्य ज्ञानवान और कृतार्थ हो जाता है. Now, this is the supreme truth of our existence, which has been told by the Supreme Himself or itself. If we know this, then we become Gyanman, then we become knowledgeable, when we become omniscient, and then we treat ourselves as having blessed with the Supreme. This is what it means basically. So, this chapter now, actually, this chapter gives you the crux or gives us the crux of the whole thing. What is this world? एक पेड़ जिसकी जड़ें ऊपर हैं और शाखाएं नीचे. And what are those शाखाएं? Those branches are the one we create with our trigunas and with our desires. We keep weaving or promoting new branches. Yeah? And then if you want, we can never understand this world because it is, so complicated. And if you want to go beyond that, then you have to cut that branch completely and go to what we call a different level. जो अहमता ममता और वासना रूपी जड़ें हैं उनको काट दीजिए. Cut those roots, and then you have to go to what we call there is a word here which he has used. Basically, you have to detach from the world, detachment, complete detachment from the world, and then go to the state of vairagya, go to the state of oneness, and then you will be able to transcend this transient world in which we are living. And then he says that once you are able to do that, you will be able to overcome the doership. We are very proud of doership. We feel that we are the doer. Then you will be overcome that because जिनका मान और मोह नष्ट हो गया है, then you will overcome that doership. That man and moha comes because of the doership. Yeah? And then you are one with the Supreme. Then he described the Supreme, what is the you know basic qualities of the Supreme, and then he distinguishes how a new body is formed into this world, how we come into this world, why a particular body is given to us, what is the Suksham Sarira, eh? And how this cycle continues one after another. And then he talks about uh, you know how we live in this world, how we taste the world, and the various bhog, various things which we consume with our sense organs, and how we continue to live with vasanas. And then he talks about uh, this particular part, that how you can overcome that part as well, by through devotion to the Supreme. And then finally it distinguishes between the nature between Jivatma and Paramatma, and he tells us that if we can understand this distinction, then we can transcend the whole world of Maya, and we can become one with the Supreme. And that really is a prayer of the Supreme. So I think this chapter, if we can understand it properly, I think we are done. Then we don't have to go anywhere else. We can attain liberation right here in this world. Thank you very much. And we are happy that we have been able to complete chapter 15, which is such a short but very deep chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And let us do some meditation on this chapter whenever we find time. And of course, next week we will go on chapter number 16. Thank you so much.